So Tom, you just got done playing about an hour's worth of Mina the Hollower, which, in case people don't know, that's Yacht Club Games, the makers of Shovel Knight's latest game, and they were showing off a brand new segment of the game that they haven't shown before, right?
That's right. I think only in private developer streams they've showed this. This is a Bone Beach segment about in the midpoint of Mina the Hollower. So when I tried this was a step up in difficulty than what I played previously.
Right, because they basically threw into the halfway point of the game, and it showed, Tom, no offense, because you got murdered a lot.
Yeah, it was. I didn't feel like it was impossible, but it was a lesson in pain at times.
You did make good progress through the demo. I believe they estimated, I think you were maybe 70% of the way through by the end, but we weren't quite able to make it all the way through within the hour session, right?
Yeah, but I did love what I saw there. It started off much like the last one, where you get a neat pixel art parallax cutscene to give the mood and where you're going to in the level. Then it started off on a Bone Beach path, going along kind of a cliffside even. Almost like, it's top down, but it was like a 2D segment on a cliffside while miners are throwing pickaxes down at you. It's funny for how cute this game is. You get things like a creepy hand with like flesh bits missing and stuff like that. Like, it's really detailed and quite not what you would expect, like, let's say if Nintendo made a game like this, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the entire art style is very evocative of the Game Boy Zelda games, like Link's Awakening, Oracle of Seasons and Ages, but despite its cute appearance, it definitely has some darker themes here, it seems, because your main collectible are bones, like actual animal bones, right?
That's right. Like, that's kind of like the currency or the way to trade those in and level up. I mean, you can bring those into a checkpoint and deposit them so you don't have to worry about losing them, because if you die, then your spark's left there and you have to retrieve that.
The spark is the bones?
The spark is basically contained in the bones and kind of like considered your life, but you have to retrieve that much like you did in Shovel Knight with your floating bags of money. And if you miss out on that next life, well, you kind of lose all that potential experience you can use and currency in the game.
And yeah, the bones can be used for basically two things, I believe, right? They're both your XP, because you can use it to upgrade stats like your offense, your defense, I think magic and something else. But then you can also use it at shops, it seems, to buy something. I don't know if we saw that in the demo, but it seems like it's a balancing act of whether you want to upgrade your own stats or buy items as well, using the collectibles you can hopefully retain as you work your way through these levels, right?
That's right, yeah, but that's just a nice refresher for anyone not familiar with the game and kind of some of its Souls-like elements that they have in it. Overall, though, I felt this demo, compared to the previous one, was even more detailed than pixel art. I feel like they were even stepping it up further than they had before, which already looked really good, and creating a really detailed and atmospheric setting. Complete with a story they're not telling you, but you can see it as you go on with like little things like miner tents on the hillside.
Specifically miners who live in tents.
Yeah. Yeah, miners that live in tents, and that, they, along with the other enemies, impede you as you go along. And as you make your way to a whale kind of stuck in a cliffside, they're in there mining away at something. We didn't find out exactly what, but it's kind of creepy, and it gives that. It's kind of like movies in the 80s, like a kid's movie. And it's like, how did I not have nightmares forever? Well, it's because I did.
I'm literally looking at that whale or star wall right now, like its face in the mountain. It is disturbing. It is creepy. And then, of course, you go inside it, much like you do Jabu Jabu, especially in the Oracle of Ages and Seasons games. And that's where you find the miners, again, at work, seemingly mining some kind of material, maybe we know what it is, from the star wall, right? Do we know what the miners are up to exactly, or...?
I'm going to point out it's NARWHAL on
NARWHAL, right, sorry, not Star Wall. We were playing Star Wall last night, so I'm got that on the brain, but...
Yeah, but it's super creepy, and, it's even got a little bit of exposed flesh or loose. Is it dead? Is it alive? Who knows? You're breaking teeth from it inside. Brings back flashbacks to my latest dentist appointment. And it's got these well animated, like they've got these eyes that roll across and they kind of perfectly roll around, and you can only hit them when they're facing you. I thought that was a neat touch. I wish you could burrow in under them once they're stopped and pick them up and throw them, but that wasn't in the demo at this point. Speaking of burrowing, though, I did have to get rid of my Zelda pattern memory and kind of remember about Mina and how well they built burrowing into this demo for all the different mechanics.
Yeah, burrowing seems to be essential here. Like, there were multiple times where it seemed like you were stuck, and it's like, no, the answer is to burrow. Like, there's something involving burrowing you're missing. And that is really it seems like one of your main ways of interacting with the world is either burrowing or using your weapon, of which you can cycle between or choose between a few different options. And I think you started with, like, almost like a hookshot-like thing, I believe.
Yeah, I started with a Morningstar kind of whip, and I moved my way to the daggers because I was told the hammer was much tougher than those in terms of timing, even though it has a more devastating attack. So for me, starting out kind of fresh again, it was easier using those two weapons, and I found the daggers a lot easier than the whip.
Because the daggers are essentially like the sword from Zelda, right?
Yeah, and they're super quick, it's shorter range, but in this setting where it's tighter than the previous demo with a lot of enemies, I found it a lot handier and more enemies together. Like the way the enemies kind of putting them together and they combine to create different situations to dodge. I thought that was one of the best parts of this demo.
Yeah, it's, watching you play it, it seemed like you had to be very deliberate in your movements at times, like more so than I'd say any, especially the Game Boy versions, but more so than any Zelda game, because there is a lot happening on screen here. You got a lot of enemies. They are very deliberate or you have to be deliberate in how you attack them, like the eyes, because you have to attack them when the iris is facing you. There are other enemies that you have to, watch out for when they take to the air or land on the ground, if I recall correctly. And you have to like pop up beneath them maybe at certain points or evade them entirely, and that just seemed to be like a major challenge of the game, was like just navigating through it. It almost felt like a more like the Jabu Jabu section in particular. I say Jabu Jabu, of course, the whale section I should say. That part in particular felt more like if Zelda's dungeons were more action focused. Is that an accurate take? Or
yeah, I'd say that's an accurate take in terms of planning the route, avoiding spots where you might drop down and be bumped off. There's these enemies that would go along walls that aren't that tough, but they shoot out a projectile, and at long range you can't hit them unless you have an item of your own. Like, just planning those things. I think a big thing too is a lot of times they put an enemy there and it's like, here I am, what are you gonna do about it? And then it's like, okay, I got a second to think here, go into the room, and then once it all starts, and from that point on, you have to have a good plan in place, otherwise things will fall apart quickly.
yeah, as I saw many times. No, sorry, Tom. Were there much in the way of puzzles when you were exploring this environment? And if so, like what were they like?
In the whale's belly, I found they did a really neat job of hinting at foreshadowing what would be coming up and having it loop back on itself to what to do. Like it started getting to the kind of 2-floor design where you can drop down to the lower one, and they had a neat enemy that was kind of stuck to a geyser that would shoot up, and you have to kill that enemy first and move up. I mean, seeing things like these in terms of puzzles, there weren't too many gears or key gears in this Mina the Hollower demo compared to the last one, so I think this was more action.
What are key gears?
That's Yacht Club's clever creation of a key that moves a gear-like device to open a door or whatever. Oh, but they did in this one have more electrical wiring that was kind of built into the whale's belly. So you can easily see if there's a locked door where you would have to go to hit a switch by just following that wire.
Okay, so how Zelda-like did it feel to you? Or like, did it feel is familiar or still very distinct at the same time while being evocative of Zelda? Or what was your kind of like overall assessment of that?
I would say previously in the original preview I did last year, it felt more evocative of Castlevania. This one, a lot more of Zelda in terms of jumping over in a sort of a top-down, almost like a top-down, sideways 2D, that Zelda style scenario, and more enemies that felt like they came from Zelda, like the little, in Zelda, those little invincible skulls that kind of just go at a diagonal and bounce around. More creatures like that. Well, also there's quite a few big enemies in Mina the Hollower that are different in those games, but overall, like these little miner guys jumping around with the pickaxes, like I feel like those remind me more of Zelda than Castlevania.
Got it. So we've talked a lot about navigating these environments, including some of the enemies. But are there any standout enemies to you that you encountered here? We talked about the eyeball, but what else was there that you came across?
There was a creepy looking cephalopod, like squid like enemy, and it's kind of just floating around, and when you get near it, or when you hit it, its kind of brain inflates and starts bouncing after you and crushing the ground. And so it's one of those where it's once you get it moving, it's really tough to avoid, so it's almost better not to touch it. But of course, they inevitably get in your way. Just the surprise of that one was something I really liked. There's a skull later on that kind of floated and released toxic gas that kind of came near you and then start either drilling the ground or bouncing at you. Perhaps most memorable was this scary, I would say, giant flea. That's kind of like if Mina was human size, this would be like the size of a bull. That would it would just be asleep, and once you get near it, it starts chasing after you. But it's almost like an energetic puppy in that it'll chase after you and jump, and if it misses, its legs kind of go all out and lands on its belly and slides a bit until it gets up and starts chasing you again. And those ones I found it easiest just to dodge and leave alone and not try to kill. In our time-limited demo, it seemed like the best strategy.
Got it. Now, speaking of time limited, we know that there was also a boss at the end of this segment too. We weren't able to get to it, unfortunately, but again, that's, you know, kind of ties it back to the Zelda inspiration, seemingly. Now that you played Mina the Hollower for, I think, around probably an hour and a half in total now, again, with this latest demo being about an hour's worth of that, how are you feeling about the game overall? Like, do you have any surprising takeaways, and do you have a better idea what the game is at this point, and how are you just feeling about it in general?
I think I have a better idea in that this really mimics the previous previews layout of cutscene, work in an open area towards what appears to be like a dungeon. Some people to talk to along the way, although not as many NPCs in this one. I find that the level design I'm really impressed by, and how they push it as it goes along and keep things fresh throughout. And overall, I'd say really happy how it's coming along to this point.
Yeah, as a big fan of the Game Boy Zelda games, like, it's neat to see a game that is evocative of that era, both, you know, stylistically with the visuals, but also in a gameplay sense as well. Except it seems it's really kind of cranking it up. You know, there's more enemies. The platforming seems even more kind of intrinsic to the gameplay, where you're jumping around or burrowing a lot. Like, they really just kind of like step everything up from what we played before. So if you're a fan of the Game Boy Zelda games, it seems like this is definitely up your alley.
Yeah, it's like, in this one, it's really like taking Jabu Jabu's belly and stepping it up a notch, and also upping the sort of creepy factor to it to be in the Mina the Hollower universe. For some things, although it's super cute, having a more gritty, realistic feel to them. It's kind of really shocking to have things like almost like a monkey's paw sticking out of a sidewall. It's like, what is that doing there?
Wait, an actual monkey paw? Not like you're not making like a figurative wish joke reference,
I'm not
right?
making a figurative wish joke, but it could be like a human hand, but to me it looks like a monkey paw.
Got it, all right. Do we know when this game's coming out yet, Tom?
We don't know yet. Like Yacht Club said in the past, they'll take their time until it's done. I'm all for them taking whatever time they need so we get the best product possible.
All right, any final thoughts about Mina the Hollower before we wrap it up?
I think even more excited than before have some segments like a lot more Zelda feel, because we are not getting a 2D Game Boy Color Zelda anytime soon. This is nice to have, and really happy to see what's coming along.
All right, well, thanks, Tom, for your impressions, and of course, stay tuned to GameXplain for more on Mina the Hollower as we get closer to its eventual release date, hopefully. So, with that, thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll catch you later. Bye.
Goodbye.